it feels like there's so many things that we could chat about. I'm sort of very excited, anxious, and nervous all at once because it feels like the breadth of the stuff that you're covering is everything. Like, even just going over your course most recently, you've done I think that you've done an incredible job of like synthesizing everything in this direction of, I guess, human flourishing
Yeah.
from this real sort of non-dual meditation, like right in that esoteric end, but then also not neglecting this kind of Greek progress of eudaimonia or virtues and values.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I
Mhm.
think you picked up a few of the dimensions there. What I try to do. Um, I think what I did in this course was really bring together three or four major ways of looking. So one is the neuroscience perspective. So this is really the lens in how we kind of construct our world, our experience, um, construct our emotions, everything that we experience is constructed. Uh, and how that kind of dovetails into non duality and meditation. So, week one is really about how we construct our experience and our reality model. Week two is about meditation and the non dual experience and awakening. And then week three is unwinding our patterns or liberation. And that's also where I kind of try to link up after deconstructing one's reality, we reconstruct. And how do we want to reconstruct? And that's where a lot of the ideas of eudaimonia, human flourishing from Western kind of philosophical tradition come together. And then week four is about metaphysics and deeper aspects um, of stories we can tell about the reality.
And so as a, like, scientist at the moment, is your day-to-day do you sort of go is that all information you've sort of discovered and collected and put together? And what are you sort of working on now? Because I really wanna get into that stuff, but I also don't wanna make you, like, repeat, stuff you've gone over so many times, like, you must be discovering a lot too.
Yeah, sure, sure. I no, look, I mean, let's go with where you want to go. I'm totally happy. Every time I kind of give a narrative, it's always fresh and informed by just kind of the way I'm looking at things now. Uh, you know, I my main position is at Oxford. I'm a senior research fellow at the Center for Eudaimonia and Human Flourishing at Linacre College, University of Oxford. And I kind of mainly work in computational neuroscience, but I also work in artificial intelligence. So, I've been um, working at DeepMind for a number of years. Uh, and that's also very relevant because thinking about how AI, uh, how perception works in artificial intelligence is very informative and helpful in thinking about the algorithms that are going on in the brain. And then, of course, that's very relevant for non dual awareness. Yeah.
Yes, your name's on this recent paper, I think, with sort of alignment and enlightenment. This
Yeah. We wrote a piece on contemplative superalignment. It's more of a, I'd say, more of a kind of a manifesto to say, look, um, we should maybe think about getting some lessons from how humans have aligned in this world. Uh, and essentially, that alignment is kind of exemplified by awakening or enlightenment. So maybe we could figuring out how to make AI enlightened.
Uh-huh. How I guess you're still figuring out, but how do you do that?
Well, we kind of put together um, 4 elements that could be important in that. One was this idea of emptiness, um, which is a Buddhist concept. I'm sure you're very familiar with it, and your listeners. One is the idea of non-duality. Another one is benevolence. So yeah, we've got a number of criteria. I think that could be helpful.
And the idea is that you would sort of train it with these ideas as, I guess, priors to some extent.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. How do we instill these kind of hyper priors in an AI? Yeah, exactly, exactly right. And it's an open question exactly how that's done through pre-training, through the system prompt. Essentially, it's kind of an accelerated enlightenment curriculum, I guess we want to give. But interestingly, maybe it'll be easier for AIs than us because um, to some extent, uh, they don't have all the kind of patterning that we do. So who knows? We'll see.
Okay, well, yes, this is the interesting territory, and this is why I love this sort of Bayesian brain account of awakening. Um, I've been interested in mindfulness and meditation for a long time. Uh, but one of the tricky parts of getting into it, I think, is something like not having to just jump straight into a religion or a center or a kind of mode method approach where you're taking on more than just the technique, I guess. Like you're subscribing to a whole lifestyle. That sort of seems like a potential costly risk of how we've been teaching it. And then recently, I've been discovering the sort of predictive processing Bayesian brain science. And it feels like we have a shot at getting something which is really you can just take the gold from these traditions. No, I'm not saying they're terrible, but the idea that you could really apply it to yourself in a flexible way if we understand how the mechanics of mindfulness and meditation actually work.
Yeah, yeah, very nicely put. Yeah, so I can see how you have been drawn to this kind of work, and that's essentially the way I see it. Um, I think I would like to say that science um, is very important for us to have as a way of thinking because it's so successful in our world. And to some extent, why would we have um, spirituality couched in language of a couple of thousand years ago versus the kind of modern scientific discourse? How could we have that kind of cognitive dissonance? And the fact is, we don't need that cognitive dissonance. The fact is that we can build these kind of bridges from contemporary neuroscience to spirituality. And this is really what I think a lot of my work has been around about, and a number of other colleagues. I think Ruben Laconin, who's a good friend of mine, also works in this kind of view. So as you say, this is very, very good. But I would also say that um, rather than push back against some of the traditions, I actually say um, there's a lot of empirical wisdom in all of these different traditions. And to some extent, on the surface level, they can disagree with each other a little bit, but there's a common core. And interestingly, the common core accords to this view of science that we have. So I take a kind of perennial philosophy view, which is that all these traditions are kind of pointing to some core truth. And I mean, maybe we should kind of, I don't know to what extent your listeners are kind of familiar with this territory, but maybe it's kind of worth giving a very quick overview. Would you like to do that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I would that's sort of what I wanna dive into anyway.
Yeah, sure.
Um, yeah, meat and bones of it, yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then you can remind me. We can come back to the perennial philosophy because I think that's uh, very important in this view. But very very quickly, I mean, you might point people to the course or some of my YouTube videos in as an introduction. So I'm not going to go through all the detailed science because it's kind of deep, but it is a very big overview. The basic idea is that we start with our perception. And, you can look out, and I'll normally always look at trees because I love trees. And you can look out, and I've got this window here, and I see these beautiful trees standing here. And, the normal sense is that I am looking out of my eyes like windows in front of my face and seeing the tree out there the way it really is. But in fact, that's not what's going on at all. Um, if you could actually see what's coming through your eyes, it would be very, very difficult to decipher. I mean, um, just to begin with, only a very, very small amount of the visual field, about the size of your thumbnail, is seen accurately and in color. And yet, look around. We see everything perfectly, all in color, all with straight lines and beautiful cartoonish definition. So how is that if what our eyes are seeing is very difficult? So what's happening is that somehow um, we are creating an experience in our minds. And this experience is a lot more than what's directly coming in real time through our senses. Um, and yet, of course, we're not divorced from our senses. If we close our eyes, we wouldn't be able to see what's going on. So, about 20, 25 years ago, if you ask most neuroscientists, how does the brain work? They would say, well, we get data from the external world, and then it's processed up lower layers in the cortical hierarchy in the brain. You first figure out what's going on with edges and corners, and then you build up objects, and then you figure out exactly what's going on, and you see, oh, I'm seeing a face. Um, but in fact, now we think that that picture is exactly upside down. It's kind of back to front. And what's going on is that, and one of the sort of interesting pieces of evidence for this is that we see 10 times as many feedback neurons into the brain than feed-forward neurons carrying the data. So that was always a bit of a strange thing, but this now makes sense. What's going on is that we're kind of, we have prior beliefs and guesses about what's going on, depending on what we've last seen, depending on what our perception has just been, and our experience through growing up, and our experience through evolution. And we then project down, create a generative model, an internal simulation, an internal um, hallucination, if you like, about what's going on. And then the output of that generative model, of that internal simulation, the output is compared with the pieces of sensory data that I actually get, the few pieces of visual data and auditory data and body sense data and all the other senses. And what the brain is doing is trying to minimize the difference, the prediction error between the output of its generative model and the sensory data. And so when it fine tunes the knobs and dials of the simulation to minimize the prediction error, that's what we see. And this it's a little bit more complicated because it happens through layers of construction, but that's the basic idea that what we are doing is simulating our experience and then minimizing the prediction error of that simulation with the actual sensory data that we get. Now, hopefully, that allows us to survive. And this whole thing has been designed so that we can survive, so we can get the food, or run away from danger, reproduce, all of this stuff. Um, Now, what's our experience? What's our consciousness? Well, this is the rather bizarre thing. We are conscious of our generative phenomenal world model. This world model that we're internally simulating, that's what we're conscious of. So we are actually living inside of our own internal generative world model. And an important part of that generative phenomenal world model is a model of the self, the physicality of this avatar with his body, uh, an attribution that these are my arms, an attribution that these are my thoughts, whatever is arising in my mind, these are my thoughts, um, an attribution of a perspectival sense that the tree is over there and I am over here relative to the tree, an attribution of a kind of narrative sense of this self, an agent. An agent is someone who is a doer. So there's a perceiving self, there's a perspectival self, there's a narrative self, there's a doer self, and what called an agent, someone who is causally doing things. Um, Now, this part of this, we call it a phenomenal self model. This phenomenal self model is in our experience, is part of our generative phenomenal world model. But here's the funny thing: we typically feel that we are seeing out of the eyes of the little avatar in our internal generative world model. So that's a very strange thing. And yet this self model is arising within my own awareness. So there's something very fishy about that. It's kind of we're confused. We're confused. We're kind of taking ourselves to be the little avatar representation inside our world model. And of course, that makes a lot of sense because it's very helpful to think that you're the little representation in your world model and you're moving around in your world model and you're capturing, you're getting the food in the world model and you're eating in that world model and like you're running away from danger in that world model. But all that world model is arising within your awareness now. So there is this big mismatch between how it seems to us and how it is. And this mismatch is important from an evolutionary perspective because it allowed us to survive. It was just a brilliant data structure to allow this mammal to survive in this world. Um, but we are under the illusion, something like naive realism, that we really think that this is the water bottle out there. But in fact, this is a representation in my mind. This is an arising, and this arising is made of consciousness in my mind. Now, that's an interesting story, but can we actually wake up within that and then see that this self is a construction, it's a mental construction, and this water bottle is a mental construction? And not only that, but the idea of space inside my own generative world model is a mental construction. And even the flowing of time within this arising is also a mental construction. That's not to say that there might not be space and time, whatever that is. That might not be some um, reality that we're existing in, but we're not seeing that reality. We can have inferences about how to move in the world, which are somehow helpful. Um, and then the question comes, how can I start to see through the nature of this constructed experience? And meditation and many other psychotechnologies can be very helpful for that. And at some stage, through careful quietening of the mind, and then perhaps deconstructing our experience so that we can see what our experience is actually made of, and see it, deconstructing it in terms of, instead of perceiving my arm, I'm perceiving the fine vibratory sensations within my arm. And actually, when I say within my arm, it seems like my arm is a construction, and all I have, when I really tune in, is this vibratory, fluxing, energetic kind of cloud, ephemeral, uh, transparent sensations. And then the whole idea of having a solid arm disappears or is seen through. And like that, all of our experience can be deconstructed. And eventually we can even come to a stage where we have quietened the mind and we have deconstructed things to such a fine level that we start to recognize something that was not apparent explicitly, which is the space of the generative model itself. And by space, I don't mean this constructed Euclidean space in front of me. I mean the piece of paper on which this simulation is being drawn. I mean the perceptual space of unfolding. It's like um, it's sort of a background which was always there, which is lighting up everything, and in fact, even lighting up any experience of a bottle, but also just the the substrate or the substratum on which everything is constructed. And that sometimes is a very powerful experience and can be life changing. And these kind of experiences can be called the ground of being, or pure consciousness, or pure awareness, or some sort of minimal phenomenal experience. And one of the interesting things when we get to that level is that we start to see that there is no property of that ground. And therefore, it itself is empty. I haven't described what emptiness means, but essentially it's this idea that um, it's the opposite of reification, of this naive realism, of making things kind of real in themselves. It's the idea that things are just a mental construction and that they don't have any um, reality from their own side. So we start to see that even this awareness, this pure awareness, is empty. And that gets very strange because then there is nowhere to stand. And then sometimes it's called the ground of the groundless ground. Now, at that level, we kind of deconstructed things by introspective introspecting into our own experience so deeply. Um, and we have found that it's all insubstantial. And then, of course, we come back into our normal experience and see that that emptiness or that groundless ground is, or that pure awareness is always there, pervading everything. And that's sort of the beginning of the awakening experience. That what we do is we wake up within the generative phenomenal world model. We wake up within the dream. We don't wake up out of the dream. We wake up within the dream, within the generative phenomenal world model. And then we can start to get some mastery over the generative phenomenal world model. We can start to see that in this generative phenomenal world model, we are really caught up and playing a game, like playing a game of Monopoly. And like, I really, really, really want to win. But when we see that this is just kind of a movie that's playing and it's insubstantial, and that we understand the movie screen on which it's playing, which is always there, which is always on, um, we become less grippy on that playing the game. You say, oh, we can kind of just sit back and enjoy the game that's being played. But then you can certainly do that and be the screen and enjoy the movie. But then there's this next phase, which we talk about human flourishing, in which can we make the movie beautiful knowing that it's empty? Now, that's very different from trying to make the movie beautiful when you don't realize it's a movie. You're just playing a game, trying to get the best job, make a lot of money, get married to, the person of your dreams. Um, Whereas seeing that it's just a movie gives us a different kind of vibe. And in spirituality, sometimes there is this, I just want to check out and witness the whole thing, go to a Himalayan cave. Other traditions will say, well, what then happens is we realize that the self is empty, is that we become less self-centered and more loving, and therefore we should help others. And that's exactly what I think there's a very strong correlation with a heart opening there. But there are many other ways and other um, aesthetic ways of being in this game, expressing one's compassion, expressing this understanding, um, a kind of awe and reverence of the whole process of what's going on here. And how is it that there's anything going on at all? And whatever is going on is kind of astonishing. Look at the trees, look at the fertile world, look at what we've done. Look at the kindness that's possible. Also, look at the horror and look how we might help. There's a lot that's possible. So maybe I'll stop there and then see where you want to go.
That's really, yeah, it's just wonderful actually listening to you set that up. Um, I guess like the question I think is really helpful for meditators within that is like, is there or what is the mechanism or mechanic between almost reification, de-reification of like sense of self perspectivity into that formlessness
Yeah.
or whatever we call it. Sorry, it's my language.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's the mechanism of deification? How do we come to see the emptiness? And importantly, from there, as things are deified, they become less grippy. There's less aversion and less craving. And as less craving and less aversion, less fixation on those things, then there's less suffering. So there's a whole chain from there. But how do we start it? And the kind of mechanism that I um, in, in, intuited in the first part of the explanation was dereification through deconstruction. Now, that's only one way of coming to see that things are empty, deconstruction, which is a kind of, actually, it's a kind of an early Buddhist move, which is vipassana, sort of deconstruct one's sensory experience, deconstruct one's thoughts. Thoughts are a little bit difficult to do to begin with. Actually, they're the kind of advanced practice. So we normally put thoughts aside and put our awareness, our attention, perhaps in our body sensations or in a mantra or anything else, and we start to deconstruct, for example, the sense of the body, and then you see that it's just made of these this vibratory movement, and this vibratory movement itself starts to be more and more empty, and any type of pain that one might have ten, can be deconstructed into a fleeting buzzing sensations of pins, needles, heat, movement, and that itself just turns out to be this uh, shimmering, ghostly set of um, movement on a backdrop of stillness. And that's how we start to deconstruct it and then de-reify it. Because what happens, for example, I mean, pain is a good one. I mean, I gave the example of the elbow, how of the arm, how it just disappears, and your whole body can disappear. And any sense of boundary that your body has disappears. And then there's a boundlessness and all sorts of things like that. So that's a typical way in. Another one is as I was saying, the sensations of pain. There's a pain in my knee, and as it's deconstructed into these shimmering body sensations, ever shifting, ever impermanent, um, which just are arising, and as they just arise and I see them arise, there's also less of an identification with them. So not only are they no longer just a solid pain, but they're impermanent. They're also not me because I'm observing them. That's kind of a strange thing. When we've got further to go there, because who's observing them is another question. But those sensations are not me because I'm observing them. They're just arising. And then what can happen is that I recognize that me not wanting those sensations is something that's also added to the experience. So there is this primary sensation of the, the pain, which itself is deconstructed into these uh, uh, micro, fleeting, impermanent sensations. But then on top of that was this coagulated sense of, I don't want this. But that's also seen and separated. And that drops away when the solidity of the pain and the drops away because there's nothing to attach them to. And so most of the suffering is the fact that I don't want this pain and I'm getting it and I'm being frustrated. And that's a lot of suffering. So when the I don't want it goes away, then the actual pain is still there, but it's not got the suffering component associated with it. And then, of course, as I said, the pain itself is deconstructed and can just be this massage. And that can be neutral. And now here's the crazy thing, it could also be pleasurable. You can actually choose to enjoy the massage. It's a very weird thing to turn kind of pain into pleasure, but that's absolutely possible. In fact, you can turn it into ecstasy. Um, But all of these are moves to de-reify, because we also don't want to be attached to the ecstasy, and we don't want to make that pleasure a thing. We can enjoy it, but in a kind of just, this is arising and it's empty, and there's an enjoyment that's arising, and that's okay as well. But the whole thing is just bathed in equanimity, except that the equanimity is simply the fact that it's not being constructed, it's just the result of not being buffeted around. So, this day reification is a very deep thing. And it's essentially, you say, how do we get it? Um, how do but we have to be, it's very interesting. We don't construct it.
Mm.
We actually deconstruct the reification. We deconstruct the illusion that this is a real thing and that I don't want it. We deconstruct that. And so, in a sense, the day reification is uh, what is kind of there without the illusory construction that's put on top that this is a real thing. And you know so when we relax out of that and just abide as uh, abide in the bubbling arising of whatever is happening, that is day reified, because it was never reification is something that has to happen on top. Just as we construct objects, we construct the reality of the objects. And when we deconstruct them, the reality of them is deconstructed. And now this is the cool thing. You can reconstruct the object, but now it has a kind of a dreamlike uh, quality where its constructed nature is known. So that's a little bit about day reification.
So in a lot of meditation traditions, they'll like hail something like non-dual awareness, which seems to be uh in opposition to like duality. Is there any significance in de-reifying the sort of self model itself, or can you, in theory, actually just de-reify anything that's naively real?
Right, good. So, in early Buddhism, the basic um, teachings were based around no self. And about 700 years after the Buddha, at the time of Nagarjuna, he really generalized the Buddha's teachings to say that what no self really means is that the self model is empty. And not only that, but the world or any other objects are also empty. And so non duality has many, many meanings, but the first and most obvious meaning is the subject object duality. So I, the subject, naively appearing behind the eyes of someone who's peering at this bottle, um, I, the subject, perceive this object, and there's this kind of relationship. And if that is, if both the object and the subject are de-reified, or indeed deconstructed, there are different ways, but it's part, as I mentioned, it's finally possible to de-reify without deconstructing. Um, that's sort of the later non-dual technology. But you can just see all these things arising in a single field of experience and a non-dual awareness. So the entire field is just happening, and within that field is a constructed self and a constructed object. Now, it's possible to not have the self model arise, um, but in a way, uh, we want to be careful of misunderstanding that people might think that um, no thoughts or um, no body sensations or no self location or no information, perspectival information should be there. You see, that would be very it's actually possible to do that kind of thing in altered states, but that is unfunctional and it's not helpful and can happen to people, but then they will not be able to cross a road. Um, and that's not helpful. What we want to do is we want to have all the information there, but it be de-reified. And it's also possible to have this very perspectival view from nowhere perspective within that, or even have absolute perspective. Um, uh, but it's de-reified. So it's not about no self if that's understood as extinguishing any self model. What it is about seeing the self as empty. So sort of people who hear about non-duality and then try to ape what they think it means go around kind of acting like I am a zombie somehow. These words are coming out. Ah, they're right. These words are just coming out of my mouth and I have no idea what's going on and how that happens. There's a naive perspective that I am saying that, but that's kind of seen through. But it's not right to say that there's no functional self model that's organizing things. It's just that that functional modeling process is not a thing. It's not kind of a metaphysical thing. It's just a data structure. Yeah.
So can I say something like, I'm just trying to process it myself, that it's like if you l lighten up or loosen precision weighting on that reified self, then it's not really being processed as a thing. So then you sort of have more ways to organize. You kind of open up a level of optimization to get more flexible and yeah, this sort of do
Yeah. So very nice. I mean, this is obviously a little bit of a term of art for um, people who are into predictive processing, and I like all of these explanations, and I have also written about many of these things. I also hold them a little lightly. I think that reducing precision weighting, which is for the listeners, what it means is weighting your priors, your models about your prior beliefs, your models, your preconceptions, your ways of looking a little lighter and um, gives you more flexibility. I certainly think that that's an important component. Um, and we like these kind of explanations because they gesture to some mechanistic approach. Yeah, I think that's part of the story. I don't think we've totally figured it out. And so I'll just be, a little bit open to say, yeah, probably one of the things that happens is that we hold our patterns of perceiving and acting, which are known as karmas and samskaras and priors in general, lightly. I think that's definitely part of it. And I think that, of course, over time, the priors themselves change. The patterns wind. That's also another part of it. That's sort of more liberation part of it. Mm. But there might also be a kind of a hyper prior that things a day reified. So maybe that's part of it.
Mhm, mhm.
So, yep, these are good questions. These are questions that in my in my kind of circle science discourse, we bat around, but you also have to hold it lightly and know that we haven't figured it all out yet.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's very interesting, like, I get very interested reading the papers because it seems like it's in there, but maybe not any, like, stamp of approval, like
Yeah, I mean, we're all like there's of course a natural thing to be graspy about. I want to know the right explanation. What I'm saying is like I think we've got a good story. I think it's helpful. I think we haven't totally um figured out a theory with empirical evidence that really will kind of hold, but there's enough of a mechanistic approach that we can start to see how this will happen. But we might find signatures of deification in the science that comes out in the next 10 or 20 years. And that's exciting. It's exciting to be at the beginning of this project. We have enough of it that we can have the vocabulary to talk about serious spiritual topics in a way that can actually transmit what we're talking about.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
You know,
Do you sort of, steal I mean, it's in the same sort of trajectory, which I guess is where my curiosity comes from. But then with that sort of insight, or maybe that, yeah, convoluted word to use in this context, but with that development, do you then get tempted to borrow any of thing for your own kind of practice and how you then approach formal meditation or anything like this?
borrow from the traditions or from the science?
I guess from the science is the first question. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's very helpful to have a view. In fact, many non-dual traditions actually say, compared to early Buddhist traditions, they say, no, we're going to tell you about the view, and then you're going to hone into that view because it's very, very helpful. And then, of course, you can let go of the view as well. But it's a little bit like the idea of um, pointing to the moon. Now, the worry about pointing to the moon, as the Zen story goes, is that people will say, "Oh, the finger is the moon." No, no, we're using the finger to point to the moon. But I would say, as a colleague of mine sometimes puts it, that now with science, we don't just have a finger pointing to the moon; we have a laser pointer pointing to the moon, and that's really helpful. It can like light up, and it's much more helpful. So I think we have better pointing out instructions. I mean, a little bit of what I've been doing um, this afternoon is kind of this pointing out from this perspective. And for some people, it will land. And I've had many, many people who have shifts in consciousness as a result of this. And it is, I think, very, very helpful to have pointing out in language and in the scientific conceptualization that people are accustomed to, that they can understand, that they can fit together, and that they can open up into.
Mm.
So I think it's very helpful. And then what happens in meditation, as we go through these experiences, many people can relax. And that turns out to be very important. I mean, I just have to tell you that, if you want to summarize the whole path, it's about letting the ego relax um, and letting everything relax. Uh, and the reason we can relax is because, for example, for the, people, I mean, you know, many, many years ago, maybe, I don't know, 25 years ago, I was sitting in meditation and like my body, like, well, became 100 meters tall and then started disappearing. And you can imagine, like, we didn't have the internet in those days and we didn't have any, like, can imagine, like, whoa, what's happening to reality here? But now, when this happens, and when they've been pointed to the view, they can say, well, relax. all that's happening is that the body map that's being constructed in my experience is dissolving, is becoming deconstructed. And that's natural. And then there's no boundaries. And when there's no boundaries, in English, we use the word boundless. And that's boundless is spacious, and it can feel very spacious and very boundless. And another word for boundless is infinite. So we can enter this infinite space, the realm of infinite space. And then you can go further and you can see, well, what is this space made of? And then you realize, well, it's not really there, this space. It's just an idea of space, and it's just all made of consciousness. And so then you can move from the realm of infinite space into the realm of infinite consciousness, boundless consciousness. So that's not going to freak anyone out. They can relax. And that's very important, because what can happen is that there can be a lot of fear around the self model dissolving. And this can actually help to know that this is totally natural and that it's not some sort of weird metaphysical view. Now, of course, that's not to say that metaphysics isn't important or isn't useful, but people can jump to metaphysical conclusions too fast. Not to say that there aren't deep metaphysical questions to be asked. So it's very helpful, because many people might be resistant to these kind of things on metaphysical basis because they kind of believe in, I don't know, a scientific worldview, for example. Uh, so what this allows you to do, that this whole scientific explanation that I'm giving allows you to do, is to essentially remove a lot of unhelpful metaphysical, philosophical preconceptions and just open to the experience, because you know it's generated. And then you can answer those metaphysical questions later, and people can answer them in different ways, and you can answer them, or you can just be agnostic about them. Mm, mm. So it is, I think, very, very helpful to. My general philosophy is beg, borrow, and steal from all traditions, all lineages, all cultures, including science, to whatever is helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's sort of wonderful because I guess that like that ties in, I'm presuming, the perennial philosophy sort of stuff.
Mm.
Big borrow and steal.
Right. Right. Exactly. So this is interesting. I mean, maybe, well, why don't we talk a little bit about that? Because, you know, we got the scientific laser pointer, we got the roots up the mountain, and the traditional idea is that all these different traditions are um, roots up the same mountain to the same mountaintop, but different paths up the mountaintop. And there is something that's very, very appealing about that, which is that when we deconstruct to pure awareness, it is the same experience or lack of experience that is recognized in all the traditions, but can be talked about in a different way from different traditions. Might be the experience of God, it might be the experience of pure nothingness, pure emptiness. Um, it might be the experience of absolute non-duality, or the Buddha nature. And these can be talked about in different ways, but they are the kind of the same experience. But as I said, there's also something that doesn't quite fit right with this mountaintop analogy, which is that the various traditions have different vibes. So you can have a vibe of, I have a relationship with God, or you can have a vibe of, I am God. or you can have a vibe of what we want is to develop compassion in the heart to help to have the bodhisattva ideal, or we can have the compassion of love, Christian love and joy, or Sufi joy and reverence, or you know, a Zen ordinary experience of whatever is happening. And so after the deconstruction, there seems to be different places to reconstruct to of having these empty clothes or ways of being in the world, including a way of being in the world which is just sitting in a cave. So it seems maybe we should be thinking about one mountain range and then, many mountaintops maybe. But that doesn't feel right as well, because then that is not um, getting to this core pure awareness experience, which is a single experience. So maybe then we can think about the perennial philosophy of what's really going on is many rivers going down to a single ocean. Mm. But that again is not right, because the ocean is this pure awareness experience or pure nothingness or emptiness or the void. But we don't live from there. And so then we come to this sort of maybe a better analogy, which is we have many rivers going down to a single ocean, and there are many beach settlements that you can hang out in and maybe take a dip in the ocean every day. But you can construct little beach settlements of like where to be. And so this is the idea that we have a kind of pluralism that can develop, that all the traditions are not the same, and yet there's a kind of core element, but you can't live from there. So, and I think that's one way of looking at it. And from that way of looking at it, um, all we've done is just got another languaging system, a languaging system of science, to help us with that same trajectory.
And that part you say that you can't live from there.
What I mean is that you can bring it back with you,
Right.
and it can pervade your entire experience. But the experience is got content now. So if you are thinking that this minimal phenomenal experience is being in a nirvikalpa samadhi or a cessation event or a pure awareness event with no phenomena arising at all, um, that's a very important experience, so that we can recognize that there is just an ocean. What we took as waves and objects was just in a single ocean. But now we can come back to a wavy ocean scene and still recognize that, oh, it's still an ocean. And actually, the waves that we thought were separate are also made of water, and it's all made of water. But we can move around, and now phenomena are arising, and that phenomena are just made of awareness as well. But it's not nothing. And we can play the game.
One extra piece in the course that I was watching through that I really enjoyed was you adding in this element of having an ecology of practices for liberation. This seems to really, yeah, I think it's tremendously helpful.
Y- Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the course, I think I must give at least 20 different practices, but they're grouped around, you know, um, practices around the mind, meditation, different types of meditation, um, loving kindness meditations, all sorts of things. Practices around the body and movement practices, somatic practices, practices around psychology, So you'll see all of these, and I think that in a modern eclectic practices, modern eclectic perspective, we each individual should choose an ecology of practices. But I would kind of recommend, um, having movement practice, having heart-based practice, having um, practices to do with awareness, and practices to do with psychotherapy or psychology, or working through one's patterns perhaps with somebody else. All of these things can really help the liberation and the awakening process, because you'll see that there's this kind of different trajectories. You can have awakening and liberation happening at different levels, but they both help each other, the paths. So yeah, I mean, I think that this is something that's very, very important. And again, this is coming from this eclectic, perennialist, open-minded to science and modern therapeutic practices. You know, therapy was not something that was part of traditional lineages, maybe because they weren't so screwed up as us, but but I think it's a genuinely helpful, um, modern psychological, technique. Uh, you know, and then there's another way of putting it, that there is a kind of awakening in the mind, but then there's an awakening in the heart, and then there's an awakening in the body. And that awakening in the body is, in a way, the sort of very, very important part of it. Um, and that's really becoming embodied. Uh, and that, you know, in a sense, the initial awakening is only the beginning of the journey. And, we want to awaken more and more in the body. Yeah. So yeah, I really, really think that this ecology practice is very important. And I, you know, thoroughly recommend that people, choose what works for them. There's no but but in general, kind of choose from different buckets. So see if yoga or qigong or ecstatic dance works for them. See if they like, different kind of talking therapies, or different types of meditation, or different types of um, chanting, or devotion, or singing hymns, nature practice, psychotherapy, psychedelics.
Uh-huh.
It's not for everyone. These are very potent and dangerous, potentially dangerous substances, but they can also be transformative. They are illegal in some countries, they're illegal in others. They are being developed as treatments already. So, yeah, they can be potentially very helpful.
Yeah, I think the reason why I love it is because it gets us into this kind of amor fati territory where it's like the things that different people are taking in their lives to be real, it's so unique. Uh, so going in this direction you're talking about is sort of like it's less prescriptive and
Yeah.
yeah, very personalized almost.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, um, I think that, uh, what we have learned in the last um, 20 years of this explosion of pragmatic Dharma and Western, or modern spirituality, is that uh, different things work for different people at different times. And um, it really is a wise thing to figure out what's working for you at this particular time in this way, and also what a kind of sensible, balanced portfolio approach is, and what's too much, or and how to be compassionate with the whole process. I mean, sometimes things can be too much, too much energy work or too much pranayama at the wrong time when you're stressed out and when you're going through a manic episode might not be the most helpful thing. Maybe you need more calming practices at that time. So this kind of wise portfolio approach, I think, is something that we've really learned that this is helpful and that it's not one size fits all. People can go to a particular lineage and kind of just be stuck on a plateau for a decade. Um, that's not necessary, I would say. I feel we can do it, and it's not just like a gung ho, very aggressive gym bro type of approach. This is uh, a wise and careful uh, and compassionate approach, and actually, you will not all get it right, but it's the whole idea of learning to dance with what's working and what's not until you get more and more um, refined in understanding how to work with these techniques and work with yourself.
That's really wonderful. I'm sort of looking at the time, and I mean, would it be crazy? Would you be interested in doing some sort of like practice together?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good idea. I'll sort of I'll do a kind of practice and I'll give a little preamble about it, about why I'm doing it and where it fits in. Um, it's what I call an A to Z practice. Um, and what we're going to be doing is really tuning into a a sense of enjoyment in the energy body. And by energy body, so I just want to use it for people who think, oh well, what's energy? I mean, energy is kind of I mean, I'm a physicist, so I understand energy is all to do with joules and work done. um we're just calling it energy, this sensation of movement and aliveness in the body. And I think it's something that I've felt that it's very good for beginners to wake up to early in their practice. It's very good for intermediate people to really work with in helping to deconstruct and use as a shamatha object, as a as an object for calming the mind and bringing us to a state of relaxed awareness or sometimes concentration. It's very useful to do vipassana, to investigate the nature of that. It's very useful then to do it as a liberation practice, even post awakening. So then, from post awakening, we come from pure awareness. We're no longer coming from the sense of self. And we're just allowing from awareness. Awareness is then aware of all the body sensations. And so we're already vast and spacious and then aware of the body sensations, and we let them self-liberate. And this is a liberation practice where the patterns are arising, self-arising and self-liberating because they're being held in awake awareness and they can automatically unwind. So it's a very deep practice from, all the way from beginners to a kind of post awakening liberation practice. So, and I think I am more and more teeing towards kind of taking people through follow the breadcrumbs of well being. And so I say that, so this is a kind of, again, an A to Z practice that I say, like, the general instruction in meditation is to let go, to relax, and to enjoy that spaciousness and enjoy the sensations in that spaciousness. So that's a little preamble. And maybe just before we start, I want to a little bit work to point out to people what we might mean by energy and what we might mean by pleasure and well-being and joy and happiness within that. Um, as a little pointing to, and then I want them to kind of um, tuck that away in their somatic memory. And then we're going to be tuning into that as we go through the meditation. So the first thing is um, what we're going to do is, well, this is unusual, but um, we might ask people to stand up, okay, and 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 feel their entire body and feel their entire body from within themselves. So not from the head looking down, but you're feeling yourself from within yourself. And now we're going to imagine that we're waking up in the morning and we're stretching and we're going to make a noise. Ah, ah. And we're going to stretch and relax and really enjoy that of stretching first thing in the morning and really feel the relief from the relaxing the tensions and have that sense of what it is to let go of tension and let go of happening. Okay, so we're really going to lock that memory in. And just if people don't know what it feels like, then imagine doing it again, but now going into a hot bath and doing the same thing and letting and relaxing into the hot water, into the warm water and relaxing and really letting go. And just as a little bit more, that same sense of relief you might have felt around your shoulders, see if you can move the rest of your body, maybe your hips or your pelvis, and do that same relaxing any tension in your pelvis and movement and anywhere that feels automatically. Let your body decide where it needs to move and let it move without you even thinking about it. Let it move from within. Okay. All right. Come back to sitting. And I want just put your awareness back in your body and feel that somatic memory of that letting go. And feel that you are relaxing and you're relaxing into the space that's relaxed. Okay, good. Now, just before we start and close our eyes, we can open our eyes again. I want to also just warm up what people might think about the energy. Let's just rub our hands really, really tight and make them warm, really warm, and then just put them out like this, palms up, and feel the vibrations. You can close your eyes. You can just feel the vibrations in your palm, the warmth, the aliveness, the the tingling, the fact that actually there isn't a clear boundary to the tops of your hands, your palms and your fingers. They're just shimmering, effervescing. And in fact, your whole body's like that. So that's just a memory of this energetic feeling. Okay, good. So now we can slowly close our eyes and still have that sense of aliveness in your palms and your fingers. And what we're going to do is just sit and just see what the weather's like in the entire body. Just like you saw the weather in your palms and your fingers, we see the weather in the whole body all at once. And feel your feet on the ground and feel your arms and your torso and your legs, and allow it to be exactly as it is. From the top of your head to the bottom of your feet, all at once. You might notice that aliveness. You might notice some movement. You might notice that it's not stable at all. And what we're going to do is, in this whole body sensation being felt from within your body, we're going to notice that it's moving because of the breath. So we're not focusing on the breath. We're focusing on the movement in the body caused by the inflation and deflation of the breath. Imagine that you're like a lung, your whole body's like a lung. And as you breathe in, you're breathing in through your skin, the whole of your skin, and inflating like a balloon slightly. And as you breathe out, you can breathe out through the whole of your skin, all over your body. Noticing the slight deflation as you breathe out. So breathing in and out, gently noticing the movement. And now notice that when you breathe in and the body inflates, there's a kind of energization of the body, an enlivening, an excitement. And when you breathe out, there's a relaxation, a letting go. So we have this enlivening, energizing, followed by relaxing, followed by an energization. And just tune into this quality of this energetic shift in your whole body, inflating and deflating subtly like a balloon, like a lung. And notice as you breathe in that enlivening, that excitement. It's kind of joyous. You can feel all sorts of pins and needles or shimmering or waviness or movement. And that movement, see if you can find some pleasantness in that movement, pleasantness in the energy. And as you tune into anything pleasurable in the body, be it in your hands, be it in your chest, anywhere, as you tune into it, you notice that it makes you smile. There's a subtle smile around your lips, a subtle smile around your eyes as you feel the enjoyable energy. In fact, your whole body is smiling. Your heart is smiling. Your stomach is smiling. Your shoulders are smiling. Your temples are smiling. The energy, the movement in your body is kind of like dancing. Feel the movement in your feet. Feel the movement in your calves. Notice how your body is alive from within, and that the boundary of your body is indiscernible. Indiscernible. There is no defined edge to your body. Your body is just this cloud of sensations, translucent sensation, and you can enjoy them and you can relax, just relax. The more you relax, the more joyous they become. The more you smile. We're not chasing this, we're just relaxing. But the more you relax, the more that deliciousness of going into the hot bath or stretching in the morning arises in the body. Just relax and enjoy it like you're sitting in a hot bath. You're sitting in the jacuzzi of these sensations, a warm jacuzzi, hot tub, relaxing, enjoying. All the sensations are dancing and smiling. It's like your body is sighing, and letting go. And as you let go, you become more relaxed. As you become more relaxed, you can let go more. And the sensations become more enjoyable. We are just relaxing into the space in which we relax into. We are this boundless space in which these sensations are arising. Just relax into that boundless space with no center. And the sensations just effervesce within that space, arising and returning to that space. It might become more peaceful. That's fine. The sensations and the enjoyment might become more and more refined, more and more subtle. Enjoy it. Relax. Allow it to be exactly as it is. Enjoy the peace. Enjoy the stillness. Enjoy the absolute accepting unconditional space which allows everything to arise. And now feel into your heart and feel how spacious your heart is and how it has that quality of relaxed openness that you can bring to it, and allow it to feel compassion for your whole body, and allow that compassion to radiate loving kindness to the whole body and shine out of your body as well and illuminate your whole perception. And from there, just feel your feet on the ground, the weight of your bottom on the seat, top of your head, and still notice how spacious you are. And that is fine. And when we open our eyes, nothing changes. The spaciousness will be there. So just check it out. Open your eyes, and the spaciousness is there. And we just come back in the world and keep that spaciousness and open heartedness. And we move about and we talk from there and we move from there, and nothing changes. And we're back.
Thank you so much. That's really beautiful. It's wonderful how much well-being feels like it can be on tap.
Yeah. I I think that I've started coming to the view that it's very skillful to have a sense of well-being all along the path. As the Tibetans say, um, the path as the fruit. And so I think it's very helpful to really allow that. As I said, that it's actually got all the components of the practice: the shamatha, the vipassana, the liberation, the awakening, all of that. So I say it's very helpful. And as the self can dissolve, that loving, joyous well being or peacefulness or relaxedness will put you in a very good way, that the self becoming empty or deconstructing will not be fearful, but will be joyous instead. So people won't have a bad time. I mean, of course, fear will arise, but you can just relax because you know what's going on now.
Yeah, that's very much what that felt like for me, like all the conditioning there before and then loosening it up and then opening my eyes and this it feels like it builds out the safety or security of remaining in this place when
Yeah.
straight away the conditioning wants to tiptoe sort of back in. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Very good. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time and, yeah, that wonderful experience. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Really, really appreciate everything you're doing.
Yeah. Fantastic. And yeah, enjoy refurbing your Italian abode.